Good evening and welcome to the first instalment of the all-new Royal Marines It's a State of Mind mini-series. My name is Captain Ryan, and as a bit of background, I'm a serving Royal Marine officer who has been working as the officer commanding the Commando recruitment team for almost 3 years now. This makes me best placed to ensure that by the end of this series of shows, you fully understand everything you need to know before joining the Royal Marines. As a bit of background on me, I've been in the Royal Marines for 7 years and have been lucky enough to have some excellent jobs so far in my career. My first role was commanding a specialist team at 4-3 Commando who were responsible for essential nuclear security operations around the clock 365 days a year. Following this, I conducted a Squadron 2IC role which saw me responsible for overseas live fire training and the daily running as a squadron. Due to me being slightly younger than my peers, I was then selected to command the Commando recruitment team who we're going to be delivering this series to you today and over the coming weeks. In a usual year, you would see us running Royal Marine experience events across the UK, and if you have ever seen Royal Marines abseil into a stadium or conduct an unarmed combat display, that was probably us. This year, however, has been slightly different for everyone, and so we're now delivering this series to you via these means, but we'll hopefully give you as much information, if not more, than if we were at a live event. The aim of this series is to ensure that you fully understand not only what training will be like, but what your future career in the Royal Marines will entail. We will try to prepare you physically and mentally so that you understand what is required of you, whilst obviously throwing in some fun bits. It's no secret that the number of applications has increased throughout the last 12 months, and so it is our job to ensure that you don't remain as an applicant and actually get you to the Commando Training Centre. Whilst at Lympstone, we will turn you into a Commando and help you earn your Green Beret. We do not expect the finished product to turn up on day one. We just want hard-working men and women who will give their all and employ all elements of the Commando spirit. These will be tested each and every day throughout training to make sure that when you pass out, you are ready to deploy on operations around the globe. Throughout the series, we will talk to you about the different weapons we use to give a brief understanding of the what, why and how. You will also receive a specially designed circuit as well as a full teach on how Royal Marines conduct specific exercises to ensure that you're ready for your virtual pre-joining fitness test and beginning training. I ask that you just sit and watch during this section and then conduct the circuit in your own time afterwards. You'll be sent it after the show. Following this, my team, who are all serving Royal Marines with an array of experiences, will talk you through their careers and their chosen specialisations. They will also offer you an insight into how specialisations will look in the future. As I'm sure you're aware, we are evolving into an ever-changing and technologically advanced force, which is being branded the Future Commando Force Online. The guys will also talk to you about the different stages of training throughout the series. This will give you a great understanding of what it is like and allow you to prepare yourselves for it. Right, that is enough from me for now. It's time for Coops to talk you through our first weapon of the series. Okay, ladies and gents, standing at the side of me we've got Coops, who's briefly going to give you an overview of his career so far and his chosen specialisation. He's then going to talk about the weapon system for this week. But first off, over to you, Coops.
Okay, yeah, so I've been in the Marines 11 years now, during my time serving all over the globe, be that Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia and the United States, just to name a few. My chosen specialisation is the platoon weapons branch, so mainly focusing on weapons instruction and sort of passing that knowledge on to recruits and also keeping other Marines current and competent in the weapon systems.
Awesome. Yeah, and as you can see, Coops has got a vast experience in the Corps and obviously within his specialisation, which is a platoon weapons instructor. All right, so he's best placed to make sure he talks to you about these weapons, you know, in as comprehensive manner as possible. This week we've got the Glock 17. He's just going to explain a bit more about that now. So over to you again.
The Glock 17, it's our chosen secondary weapon, replacing the Browning in 2013. It's a 9mm caliber. Ranges, you're looking at sort of maximum of about 50 metres and sort of effective range probably 25 metres. As I said, it is a secondary weapon, so you're only going to go to it if your primary weapon fails for whatever reason. Looking a bit closer at the Glock 17, you can see it's mainly made of a sort of polymer plastic that keeps the weight down, which is great for us, and it's also got that ergonomic design, meaning that it fits the hand really well, provides a more comfortable grip for the firer, that then translates to more accurate shooting. Weight-wise, it only weighs just under a kilogram, so a very light weapon system. Most of the weight is contained within the top slide, which actually means that it's a more accurate shot having it top heavy like that.
As you can see in front of us, we've got a few of the bits that obviously go alongside with the Glock 17. So I think Coops is just going to briefly talk you through them as well.
Briefly talk about the magazines. They hold 17 rounds. A lot of people think that's why it's known as the Glock 17. It's actually just because it's the 17th variant, so that is a coincidence. Also made of polymer plastic with just the metal spring inside. So again, looking at that weight reduction there. Moving down, we've got the weapon sling, just ensuring that the pistol does stay attached to us should it sort of drop for whatever reason or someone else tries to take it. It means we've still got that lifeline to us as well. And then we've got the two holster variations here. So starting off, we've got the leg drop holster. So this is the one that you'll most commonly see. All that does is it's got two belt loops there that attach it, and then two leg straps there. That will just strap it to the outside of the thigh in a position where your hand will naturally fall to it. That will aid in a smoother draw of the weapon. The other option we've got is a hip holster, or known as an S-clip. So this will sit higher up on the body, pretty much on the hip, and that's predominantly used with the Royal Marine boarding teams. They'll attach it to their climbing harnesses, so as they're moving up ladders, going through hatchways and stuff, it presents a much smaller snag hazard than if they were using a leg drop holster. So with just a bit more sort of training to bring the hand to the hip rather than to the thigh, then it soon becomes muscle memory.
Yeah, absolutely. As Coops pointed out, the main thing we do with this is dry drilling, just making sure that it's muscle memory and absolutely sort of second nature to draw your pistol, as if you're drawing your pistol, there's probably a good reason for it. As you know, Coops, when we're at air shows, different events across the country doing the job that we do, and we often get asked sort of what's the difference between a Glock and, for example, the Beretta M9, which is what's currently issued to the US Marine Corps. Do you just want to explain the differences a little bit?
Looking back in at the Glock, so first off, in comparison to the Beretta, as you pointed out, the Beretta has an actual safety catch. So whilst the Glock doesn't have a physical safety catch, it does have other safety features built in, which does make it better for us, because when you're drawing a secondary, you need it ready to fire straight away because you are drawing it in an emergency, basically. So fiddling around with a safety catch is potentially wasting precious seconds that you don't have. It does have a trigger safety mechanism, which means that you must have a proper grip in order to fire it, as well as a drop safety, so the weapon won't fire if it's dropped to the floor. And also the holsters themselves do have safety mechanisms built in to prevent the weapon firing by accident.
Yeah, awesome. I know I certainly prefer firing the Glock over the Beretta M9, which is often a bit clunky and heavy, as you said. Some of the people watching are probably looking now wondering, whoa, you know, how am I going to get to that sort of level and knowing that much information? Just want to explain to everyone what sort of training you'll get on a pistol.
So during recruit training, you will get a lot of training on a weapon system before you come to actually firing it. So you will spend time down the weapon stances at Commando Training Centre of Royal Marines, working with the weapon instructors, and they will ensure that you're up to the correct standard. You'll perform a weapon handling test on every weapon system that you will use during training, and that will ensure that you are competent enough to use that weapon in a live fire situation. After that, you'll progress onto the ranges and then conduct firing tests on the ranges to ensure that you are fully current and competent on that weapon. So you will not leave Commando Training Centre Royal Marines without being, as I said, fully competent on every weapon system that you cover.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as Coops pointed out, you'll get a lot of training on it whilst you're in recruit training. And I believe now there's a full week of recruit training absolutely focused on the pistol. And then after training, there's obviously other courses you can do. Do you just want to?
Yeah, of course. So the first one that springs to mind is you've got the combat pistol coaching course. So this is actually moving on, looking at becoming more of an instructor role. But it's a week-long course purely focused on the pistol, and actually all the firing techniques you can use, picking up potential mistakes, watching another firer, stuff like that, and that can actually aid your own personal marksmanship a tremendous amount. And moving on again from that to the more sort of sniper world, as well as the sniper rifles we use, snipers also love the pistols as well, so they do a lot of work working on their marksmanship with the pistol.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, as Coop pointed out, there's loads of courses you can go on, and clearly, as a Commando Duties Marine, which we'll talk about later in the episode, you know, when you're employed and you're doing training continuously week after week, you will constantly be using the pistol alongside other weapon systems just to make sure that you keep improving and keep building that muscle memory. Thanks for that. We'll see you next week when we speak about the SA-80, which I'm sure you'll enjoy, as I'm sure everybody else will. Next up, we're moving over to Joe and Blaine for this week's PT circuit.
Good evening and welcome to the PT session for today. I'm Joe, this is Blaine, and we're now going to take you through today's circuit. Today's session will help build your posterior chain conditioning, which will aid in conducting maximum reps while also maintaining perfect form during your VPGFT assessment. A strong posterior chain is essential for improving running, something that will be severely tested during your recruit training PT sessions conducting camp circuits. Today's circuit will be 10 rounds for time, consisting of burpees, hand release press-ups, air squats, and backward lunges. Want to make clear now that you're not to be conducting this circuit as we're demonstrating it here now. The circuit will be released at a later date for you to conduct. What we're going to do now is break down each movement so you can get perfect technique and not injure yourselves unnecessarily. Also need to make aware that it's critical to warm up before you conduct any exercise. We will go into that at the teach at the end of this circuit session. We're now going to move into each individual exercise and break down for perfect form. First up, the burpee. Okay, as you saw there, that was the burpee demonstrated in the manner that you will conduct during your VPGFT assessment. So it's critical that you get this technique right for your assessment. Starting position, he stood feet and knees together. This makes sure that he's got good balance and he's ready, prepared for the next part of the movement. Yes, please. Okay, as he's gone down, he's placed his hands, palms to the floor. Notice I said placed. It is essential to get this bit correct, otherwise you're going to unnecessarily injure your wrists or your shoulders and elbows. Next movement. He's shooting his legs out to the rear nice and quickly, head and eyes facing forward, which is critical to make sure you keep a nice neutral spine. Okay, this is critical, as I say, because you don't want to be injuring the lower part of your back. Returning his legs, knees to his chest, and his head and eyes are still facing forward. This is to make sure that he maintains his balance for the next part of the movement. And he returns to the starting position, feet and knees together again, and he's ready for the next rep. Moving on to the next exercise, hand release press-ups. Yes, please. The hand release press-up is a very useful variant of a press-up. It's going to help improve your score on your VPGFT assessment. By breaking the inertia and removing your hands from the floor, it's going to help strengthen your chest and target your triceps, as I say, improving your score. We're now going to move into a slow demonstration to help you get the technique correct. Yes, please. As you can see in the starting position, just like the burpee, head and eyes are facing forward. He's keeping a nice neutral spine all the way throughout. Into the next movement, his chest goes down to the floor, his hands come away. He then returns his hands to the floor, keeping his palms flat, and then pushes the floor away. We like to say in the core, we bench press the earth, we don't push ourselves away from it. Moving into the next exercise, the air squats. Okay, moving into the starting position. As you can see here, feet shoulder width apart, his arms across his chest. This is to help maintain the balance throughout the exercise. As you can see, his feet are flat on the floor. This is crucial to maintain throughout the entirety of the exercise. You don't want your heels coming away or your ankles and knees bowing in. Into the next part of the exercise. Okay, legs 90 degrees, knees not going any further past the toes. Utilising his arms across his chest to maintain his balance. and he's returning to the starting part of the exercise, ready for the next rep. Notice how his feet stay flat on the floor the entire time. The next and final exercise is the backward lunge. We're now going to break that down into slow time so you can get the technique correct. As you can see, he's taken a full step backwards, keeping his knee off the floor. His knees are not going any further past his toes. And he's returned back to the starting position for the next rep. Okay, it's critical to make sure that your knee doesn't touch the floor, because when you're doing these at speed, the last thing you want to be doing, if you're on hard standing, is to hit your knee off the floor and injure yourself. This is a very good exercise to help build up strength in your posterior chain. Those were the exercises for today's session. We're now going to move on to a warm-up teach. A warm-up is something that is critical to take part in before you go into the exercises. When you warm up, you want to do an initial pulse raiser. This is to raise your heart rate to get blood flowing around the body and release synovial fluid into your joints. As I say, this is going to prevent injuries, but it's also going to make sure that you get maximum reps out of every exercise you do and maintain form throughout. Once you've done your initial pulse raiser, you want to go through a mobility phase. So this will be anything from mobilising your joints by swinging your arms forwards, backwards, even practicing swimming strokes. Even if you're in your back garden, no matter how silly you may feel, it is critical to make sure you do this, as I say, to prevent injuries. Once you've gone through a mobility phase, you want to then move into a dynamic flex. This isn't to stretch out your muscles, it is simply to lengthen and improve the elasticity of your muscles, preventing any injuries. Once you've gone through the dynamic flex, you then want to go into a final pulse raiser. Again, this could be jogging around your local football field. You want to raise the intensity just a little bit higher to get your heart rate fully up, ready for the exercises ahead. Just to make sure you've got a clearer picture on how to conduct a warm-up, Blaine's now going to demonstrate a few ways of doing pulse raiser, mobility, dynamic flex, and secondary pulse raisers. Okay, the first pulse raiser, you can go into anything from jogging on the spot to star jumps. For mobility, this can be anything from front stroke to punching to the front. Moving into dynamic flex, this can be shoeing the chickens, hitting into your hamstrings, and then alternatively, if you are going to go into a stretch for the quadriceps, this is simply 3-second hold and then stepping out of it into the next leg. You want to make sure that you're not holding this for anything longer than 3 to 4 seconds. For the second pulse raiser, this is going to be just the same as the initial pulse raiser, but as I said, you're just raising the intensity. So this can be anything from jogging on the spot, you're just doing it at a faster speed. Thank you. Okay, it's crucial to know that this is just a warm-up. You're not going to go 100% into it. You're just keeping it at a lower level just to make sure that your body is nice and warm, ready to exercise. These have been a few demonstrations. There are more out there. You can find these out on the Royal Marines YouTube page. That concludes today's PT session. Just to recap, we've gone through the circuit, which consisted of burpees, hand release press-ups, air squats, and backward lunges. As demonstrated by Blaine, you now have an idea of how to conduct these exercises with perfect technique, and there are no excuses for when you attend your VPGFT assessment. We've also covered a warm-up teach, which, as I said before, is crucial to make sure you do before any form of exercise. And remember, it is not a maximal effort, it's just to get your body prepared for the hard exercise ahead. As I look forward, next week we'll have a new session for you, and we will also go down into a cool-down teach.
Thanks to Joe and Blaine for that session. As he said, it's super important to conduct all of the exercises with the correct technique. There are plenty of videos online outlining exactly how to do it as well. Some of you may be working at a level above this already, but the purpose of these sessions is to ensure that you are ready for your virtual pre-joining fitness test when it comes around. They are also all core exercises that you will use throughout recruit training, and so it will be massively beneficial for you to master them early. If you aren't confident conducting these exercises at home, which the sessions are designed for, then please seek help from a fitness professional to make sure you don't cause yourself any harm. Now it's time for something a bit less physical, but equally as important. It's time to speak to some of my team about their career and what their specialisations are. For a bit of context before we hear from Josh, the Royal Marines have just changed the way in which we specialise at different stages throughout our career. In line with the way that we will operate as part of the new Future Commando Force concept, we will have more ranks employed in Commando duties roles. Formerly known as general duties, these are exceptionally trained commandos who will conduct the day-to-day business on operations and in training. You will be employed as a Commando duties Marine for around 2 to 3 years before you look to specialise in a specific area known as a primary SQ. However, whilst you're a Marine employed on Commando duties, you will now have the opportunity to select SSQs or secondary SQs. These range from combat boarding operator, combat assault breacher to combat communications and everything in between. This will ensure that a vast quantity of the force is trained to a higher and more advanced level in certain areas to make us absolutely brilliant at the basics. This will also allow us as commanders to select specialist ranks for certain tasks based on the intelligence that we have and specialisms that we require. A Commando duties Marine can gain secondary specialisations in a whole host of areas, before then deciding to become a bespoke subject matter expert in an area, then promote through that branch. Hopefully, a core of multi-skilled commandos infographic has just appeared on your screen. Although this is quite in-depth and potentially confusing, I just want to take a moment to briefly talk you through it. As you can see, the left-hand column is made of the SSQs, which I will talk you through in a bit more detail each week throughout the series. As an overview of what all that means, it's quite simple. The left-hand side of the page are areas in which you can specialise whilst you're a Marine. Again, I'll talk you through these each and every episode to give you an understanding of what they are. The right-hand side of the page shows the deep specialisations, which are areas in which you would learn those trades in much more depth as you promote to the rank of corporal and further into your career. I wouldn't get too worried about that for now though. I just wanted to show you that information to allow you to see how many different options there are for your career. I'm sure you can now see the huge amount of opportunities that you will have to conduct further training and gain excellent qualifications in a whole host of areas throughout your time in the Corps. Anyway, enough of me talking for now. It's time to have a chat with Josh about his time as a general duties, now Commando duties Marine, and as a combat signaller. Right Josh, can you just tell everyone a little bit about your career so far?
Yeah, so about 5 years ago now I passed out of recruit training at Lympstone and was drafted initially to 4-5 Commando in Arbroath in Scotland, where I became a Commando duties Marine initially. I spent 2 years in that role, specialising in different areas of weapons within the Commando duties role. And from there I looked to add more strings to my bow, and I pushed on to become a combat signaller, or what was then known as a signaller in the Royal Marines. The course was about 12 weeks long, and it taught me all aspects of communications within the Royal Marines, using all aspects and all different platforms of radios within that specialisation.
Can you just explain to everyone, when you were a general duties, now Commando duties Marine, what the sort of day-to-day life is like, both in the UK and then obviously whilst deployed?
Yeah, so day-to-day life as a Commando duties Marine was relatively simple. It comprises of essentially training within the UK, practicing our skills and drills in the roles that we play on operations or overseas, but just over here in the UK. So, you know, a normal daily working routine will be up at 8 AM, you know, conduct military fitness or, you know, some form of fitness in the morning before having, you know, a brunch or lunchtime, and you know, and conducting more training throughout the day, whether that be lectures or classroom-based activities, and then more often than not, some range time throughout the day as well. Might go down to you know, the local range and, as we would say, put some rounds down. And then yeah, basically in a nutshell, we conduct our training just in the UK, mega simple, and finishing the day around 5 o'clock. You
mentioned that obviously you did the signals branch, obviously before it's changed to combat signaller, so you were a signaller. Can you just explain to everyone sort of why that's important and what you sort of got up to once you did that role?
Yeah, so the role of a combat signaller, as it's now known, is I think pretty much every soldier will agree with me that it's one of, if not the most important role as a ground soldier, as your troop on the ground. We have an expression in the Royal Marines which is no comms, no bombs, and I think that pretty much summarises, you know, why it's so important, because without communications on the ground, you have no ability to call in for resupplies or call in for air support, or so without communication support and without that network of communications, then the battle space and the battle picture will just fall apart.
Right, now it's time for us to switch fire a little bit and start talking about recruit training. Obviously, it was a few years ago when you did it, Josh, but do you just want to talk everyone through sort of your initial experience and how you found it?
Yeah, sure. So I was 19 at the time when I started recruit training, and it was a bit of a shock of capture turning up to Limpston and learning those initial skills and drills and things that they teach you. The first sort of phase of training, learning basic field craft and specialising in the weapons and learning how the weapons work, and then progressing through to the commando roles later on in training and learning that commando role as a general duties marine, or commando duties marine as it's now known, culminating in our commando tests, our 4 commando tests at the end. It was particularly difficult. It was a difficult 32 weeks. Yeah. Lots of things go on, and I ended up getting injured at points in that. But went through the recovery process and finished my training.
This week we're gonna focus on the ROP, the recruit orientation phase, and then Josh is going to talk to you about weeks 1 to 10. Hopefully the RS20 training poster is now on your screen. This week I'll talk you through the ROP, as it is a fairly new addition to training, before we allow Josh to go into a bit more depth into the first 10 weeks once the ROP is complete. The recruit orientation phase, or ROP as we call it, is a 4-week conditioning period at the beginning of Royal Marine recruit training. On completion of the 4-week ROP, having been developed through a progressive sub-maximal training programme, you will participate in a maximal assessment similar to the Potential Royal Marines course. It's named the Commando Aptitude Assessment, which will incorporate greater levels of physical training, determination and mental resilience. During this time, as you can see, you will start off with the very basics of things like cleaning, ironing, washing, caring for your kit and uniform, all whilst gradually building up to the Commando Aptitude Assessment at the end. You will begin learning individual skills such as weapon handling lessons and basic field skills, including cooking and sleeping. Trust me, it's an art form when cold, wet and tired. The ROP culminates in the Commando Aptitude Assessment, which is designed to be conducted immediately after a 2-day introduction field exercise, followed by a 4-mile speed march back to CTCRM. You will proceed immediately to the bottom field, where you will undertake a determination exercise before deservicing and reservicing your weapon, your kit and your equipment. If successful, you will then progress through to mainstream Royal Marine recruit training. From your point of view, the ROP doesn't make much difference to your journey, other than the fact that it's an extra 4 weeks in training, so I wouldn't be overly concerned about it. As I mentioned earlier, it is there to make sure you are ready to start training and in the right mindset to embark upon your journey to achieving your Green Beret. Right, let's have a look at the first 10 weeks of training and see what it entails. Josh, would you mind just talking everyone through the first 10 weeks or so of training?
Yeah, no problem. So, you finished your time in the ROP now and you're moving into your first phase of training. So you're going to be, looking to learn your basic weapon skills. You're going to be, learn how to put that weapon, take it apart, put it back together, and you're going to conduct some early shoots, some simple shoots on the 25-meter range. You're also going to do, basic navigation skills. You're going to learn to navigate in daytime and at night, and you're going to learn to conduct yourself in the field and learn those basic field skills, how to clean yourself in the field, keep yourself clean and robust while you're out in the field. From there, you're going to look to move through. Everything's progressive in the first, phase of training, and you're going to move through that first phase. And what you're going to then do is you're going to move on to doing more advanced shoots. You're going to learn some close quarter marksmanship shoots and some survival training as well. You'll learn how to survive on minimal kit and equipment over long periods of time. From there, you're going to do a battlefield tour of Normandy. You're going to go out to France and look around the beaches of the D-Day landings. And phase 1 will culminate in a family's day, which is one of my most favoured parts of training. It's the first chance that your parents will get to see where you've, how you've come, how you're looking and where you've got to in your training. So,
finally, before I let you go, if you could give one piece of advice to the people watching now who've got their applications in, what would that be?
I think the piece of advice that I would give somebody that's joining now is to spend less time in the gym building muscle and doing what I would call beach fizz, and spend more time focusing on the technique and the core exercises that have been delivered in these videos previously.
Thanks a lot for that, Josh. Great piece of advice, and I couldn't agree more, to be honest, so good effort. Okay, ladies and gents, that is us drawing episode 1 to a close. Just to recap, tonight we looked at the Glock 17 weapon system. Coops gave us a great talk through of the different characteristics of it, how we use it, and the sort of training that you can expect to get on that weapon. As we mentioned, it's super important as it is our secondary weapon and essentially our final lifeline when you're in that critical firefight. Joe and Blaine then delivered a posterior chain-based circuit, which is important as when you start training, you'll be on your feet a lot more, moving around and doing things you wouldn't usually be doing in day-to-day life. I know from personal experience, my lower back was quite sore when I first started training, so strengthening that part of your body will really help, especially when you first start training. We then spoke to Josh about his career so far and the time he's spent as a combat signaller, as well as covering briefly the first 10 weeks of training. As we spoke about when we looked at the training is progressive and there is a reason for that. As I've said before, we don't expect the finished product to turn up on day one. It's progressive and designed that way to make sure that you get there by the end. So don't be worrying too much about things you'll be doing in sort of weeks 8 to 10 of training. We will make sure you get there. We then briefly talked about the SSQ system and the way in which Royal Marines will specialise in the future and going forward, but we'll talk more about that next week. As I look forward to episode 2, next week we'll cover the SA-80, which is our primary weapon system. So again, something super important for you to get a look at before you start training. We'll have more Phys or PT from the guys, and we'll look at a different specialisation before talking to one of my lads about their career so far. We'll briefly cover more of the SSQs and look further into training so you know what to expect. The contact details for getting in touch with our specialist team will be given to you straight after this. But if not, and you've not got any questions until next week, we'll see you there. Thank you for watching.